everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and look, it's the Day Ghost!
I will break you.
And today, Austin and I are going to tell you how we felt about a movie that came out 35 years ago, but not that original cut. Today, we're going to talk, of course, about the director's cut from Stallone, and they've, for this cut, given it a subtitle. So this is Rocky IV, Rocky versus Drago, and the movie has been changed significantly enough that I thought it would make sense to do a sign flip on this and have a little bit of discussion. So I brought Austin in here, who is also a fan of the Rocky movies. And Austin, why don't you set this up for us a little bit and talk just briefly about the major changes, the main reason that Stallone felt the need to give us a new cut of this movie, and then we'll do sign flips.
Rocky 4, Rocky versus Drago is Rocky 4 without some of the crazier elements in it, and it's still Rocky 4 at the end of the day, but it's still, he's trying to like bring it down to a more serious film as much as he can and tie it a lot more into the relationship between Rocky and Apollo Creed. One of the big things I was interested in this was Rocky 4 famously was too short, so they had to add another like montage. So it's like, if you're cutting stuff, what are you adding? And there are like deleted scenes, I think, they put in, but there's also a lot of just footage from other movies that like flesh out like their relationship for this story.
And it opens with a 6-minute montage just reminding you of the major beats from the last movie, again, particularly having to do with that relationship. It's not just a recap of that film. Like, it's kind
because
of...
they all start with recaps, but this is a lot longer. Like, this is kind of beat for beat their relationship from Rocky 3. And then you even get some reprises of that later on.
And it gets away from the traditional format of that, which I'm not totally sure how I feel about. Because, yeah, they all open with montages, but, or not even montages, but just the last thing that happened in the last movie. And you know, depending on whether you want this to feel like the definitive version of Rocky IV, like this is the version that you wish had come out in the movie theater, it's a little bit weird that it opens with again, montage of things that happen throughout that film and not just the fight at the end of the movie, because that's what it usually does. But the original Rocky IV already broke that tradition in then also giving you the stinger with the fight, or with the like behind closed doors fight between the two of them. That is axed from this. But it also doesn't do the traditional opening music either. It's not the dun 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 dun, and with like the Rocky IV going across the screen. So it kind of feels like it expects that you've seen a cut of this before.
Yeah, which does make sense for like a director's cut release so late. Like, most people have probably seen Rocky 4. I doubt this is going to be anybody's like first experience with this movie.
No, probably not. But it's. And I guess I'm probably going to give too much away about my opinion of this right out the gate, but like, it's fleshed out enough. It fleshes enough of the stuff out that I always wondered about. Like, I was always in the camp of, yeah, that movie is way too short, and there must have been stuff on the cutting room floor. Like, it felt edited down like crazy to me, and like it was missing scenes, and like they had to really pad it out with the driving montage and all of that. It's really weird that's still here. We'll talk about that, or I think it's weird that's still here. But anyway, so when I heard this was happening, I wanted it to be a really good replacement for the original. I wanted it to be like full stop what you wish had come out in the theater. And it has a little bit of that Donner cut thing for me, where it's still not the exactly the definitive version of this movie, but man, it's close enough that I kind of wish we had stuck to more to the tradition of it. And I think it's weird that it feels the need to have so much recap at the beginning, because Yeah, it sets the stage thematically for what Stallone really wants this movie to be about, which I respect it for because it's the focus that I always wanted it to have, and that I thought was there but not drawn out. So like it's it's like a good writer in revision going, oh, here's this relationship, here's thematically what we're doing with this guy and his old friend and losing him and the importance of change that he couldn't convince his friend couldn't quite convince Creed of, and learns ultimately himself in a different way. That's all great, really finally drawing that out. But it seems like the reason all that's there at the beginning from the last movie is just in case you haven't seen that movie in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't think that was necessary.
Yeah, because that's why they were like originally there. It was in a day and age where you kind of had to remind the audience what happened last time.
But all you reminded them of before was just the fight. It was just kind of reliving that. It seemed to me like the main reason those were there is it's going to be a while before you see boxing.
Yeah, no, that's fair too.
Which I guess is not true in 3 because very quickly we get in 3 because very quickly we get Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, the Thunder Lips fight that is so embarrassing it killed Mickey.
But anyway, why don't you go ahead and do your sign flip first? Give us best thing, worst thing, and just overall how you feel about this cut. And I guess the most important thing to answer is just, do you think this is a superior cut?
I'm gonna go feeling it. I went into this movie like I got some writing stuff I gotta do, so I'll kind of do it while watching it. And then the second it started with Rocky 3, I was like just glued to the screen. I was like, okay,
that's
great. Close the book. I'm too focused in on this, and I was like, I need to just rewatch all these movies right now. I don't know, I just love the Rocky movies. Like even when they're not great, like I really like those movies. Best thing, I'm gonna start with my worst thing because my worst thing is really dumb. Which is just that the robot stuff makes me laugh, and I kind of wish that we still put it in, but that's fine. Best thing, I don't know, it probably is just like the relationship between Rocky and Apollo. It definitely did feel a bit more fleshed out and more thematically. Like I was thinking about it a lot more in this version than I was in the original, where I'm kind of just there to see Rocky punch a giant Russian guy.
A giant Russian guy who also gets just enough like new things to do that he feels like more of a real character than he did in the first place.
Yeah, for sure.
He has some dialogue now. And I read that he has dialogue that was like taken out in the first place that's just put back in now. Just like real subtle additions where I think, I might be wrong about this, I think there are bits where where you actually see the same thing you saw on screen before, but they've just given him his dialogue back, where like he was talking, but they took his dialogue out of the scene.
Oh, interesting.
I think
really
that
wish
happened.
I had a chance to watch both cuts back to back. So there's probably small stuff like that I didn't catch.
Yeah, and that I only know about because I read about it. But yeah, I haven't watched. Well, I watched through the Rocky movies again when I was on my last hiatus, so it's been probably 3 months maybe.
I don't know if this is like a change, but it was something I thought, and I like if you read stuff, I'm interested to see if you saw this.
Yeah.
Did Stallone dub a line like right now for this movie?
I don't know that.
There's a part where he like falls down, and it's like him monologuing to himself in his head, and it sounds like 70-year-old Stallone.
Okay, yes, I think that is new. I know that's, of course, a new added thing that wasn't in the first movie, but
for sure.
In the moment, I found myself wondering if that was something that they had left on the cutting room floor, but it sounded older, and it was entirely superfluous. We did not need that.
Yeah, well, I think that's what made it like even more distracting, where it was like, okay, like this isn't really what he sounded like back then. It's just kind of,
and also just not a thing that they had to do with that they really did in those movies, right? You didn't really have internal monologue, but I feel like later on somewhere we get that, and I can't remember where. Does one of the Creed movies do it?
I've only seen
Or
the first one. I still need to see the second one, but I
oh
don't
yeah,
remember that in the
and
first.
it's wonderful. I gotta say, I do wish you'd seen Creed 2 before looking at this because I think I appreciated this more because of what we do with Drago in that movie. I'm really glad post having Creed 2, we're getting again just the subtle added scenes that they cut out initially from Drago. Because they kind of inform weirdly, retroactively, what he does in that movie, where he is like honest to God, real sympathetic in that. It's like an Oscar-worthy performance from Dolph Lundgren, which are words I never thought I would put together in a sentence.
Well, that movie has to be why this came out, right?
Yes,
Like,
I would think
yeah.
so. And I've seen other people say that where it's like, this weirdly informs that movie.
Interesting. Yeah, I wish I did see it then. I've heard nothing but great things about Creed 2. It's just I just haven't watched it.
Sure,
I don't know.
yeah.
I gotta get to it.
It's crazy how on par the quality is with the first one. Like I can't tell you which of those is a better movie. And different directors too.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
It's cool. And if you told me that first guy directed the second one, I would believe you. Like they're just the quality of it is straight up the same.
Yeah, that'll be interesting too because I think Michael B. Jordan's directing the third one.
That's really cool. Just
I've heard that. I don't know if that's
the Stallone tradition. I mean, I don't know if he's ever directed anything, so I don't know if that's a talent he has, but in theory, it sounds really cool to have that again because Stallone, of course, wrote and directed so many of these.
Yeah, and he writes all. I don't remember how many he actually directs, but he writes all of them. And I think he was one of the writers for Creed 2. I know he was supposed to direct it, and that kind of fell
I'm
through.
pretty sure he wrote Creed 1 or co-wrote it.
I think Creed 1 is the only Rocky movie he's not involved with for the screenplay.
Oh, maybe
but I could be wrong.
Maybe not. Yeah, he definitely did Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, exactly. I want to say he directed Rocky Balboa.
I think he did. And for a while, there was a rumor that he was going to direct Creed 2, and then that ended up not happening.
Yeah, no, he was supposed to be initially, or like maybe it was just rumored, and then that kind of fell through.
But anyway, so yeah, I'll do my sign flip real quick. Obviously, I'm feeling this. This is, again, I don't think exactly the definitive cut of this. Like with so many things, like with some of the Deadpool 2 cuts and with Superman 2 and some of these things that we've had multiple cuts of, I still feel like there's an amalgamation of this and the last one that should probably be put together now. Or at least... Yeah, no, I'm going to stand by that. Amalgamation. So, yes, keep the robot thing out, by all means. It is a little bit weird losing it just because Paulie has...
It takes away, like, Paulie from this movie, basically.
Until he suddenly is involved again, in the same way he is in the original, of course, and it's like, oh, now he's a presence. That's really weird. I've kind of forgotten about this character. So that's a little bit strange. If you had it somehow to do all over again, of course, if you could go back in time, you would just shoot some different things for him to do at the beginning. In a lot of ways, this is like a fan cut, if that makes any sense, where it feels like, and I guess when you go back to, old footage like this, and you're trying to cut in deleted scenes that look like of the quality, some of them that would be on DVD, features, it is gonna feel a little bit like that. We've got a little bit of that Power Ranger Sentai thing, where even if you don't remember what scenes are in Rocky 4 and which ones aren't, if this is the first time you're seeing this, if you're paying close attention, some of the new scenes you can tell they're new just because the video quality is completely different than the rest of the movie.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even catch that.
I was watching it on a pretty big screen. I didn't get to go to the Fathom event for this, which I wanted to do, and it was at the same time as the Captain Logan show, so I couldn't go. But I do really appreciate that they put this out the day after for rental and for purchase. Cause that's very respectable, because that doesn't always happen. And, sometimes you'll get a Fathom event for a thing that had a one-day screening where there was only one time you could go, and then it was like 7 o'clock on a Thursday. That's all you had, and then you got to wait 3 months for it to come out. Or if it does come out right away, it's at a purchase price of like $15 or $20, and you can't even just rent it. And this was a $4 rental in several different places the day after it premiered. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah, there probably wasn't like a lot of money put into having this made, so they probably could get away with that.
It was really nice that they did it that way. But anyway, what I would probably do to hobble together, like, there is a fan cut I think you could make now that would be the closest definitive Rocky Four thing, and mine would look different from Austin's because I would not put the robot fight or
Mine would just be
the
the
robot
robot
thing
and
back
everything
yet.
else.
But I like a lot of the choices in what's cut. I don't understand leaving in, like I said earlier, the goofy driving montage. And I mean that's of course one of the things that makes it the kitschy mid '80s thing that it is, and a lot of people would kind of miss that and be heartbroken. But it's one of the things that was there to pad the thing out, and it doesn't need padded now. It's long enough, and actually it's kind of too long. I mean, it's like 205. There's no reason this movie needs to be any longer than probably an hour 45, hour 50. And like, you take the driving montage out and you take out the 6 minutes of footage from the beginning, and it's it's the movie. It's the length it ought to be. But I also would say it actually could maybe even be a tad shorter than that, because there's a couple of deleted scenes, and we have this a lot with these kinds of cuts, where by director's cut, what Stallone is really saying is there are some things you never got to see, so let's find a way to get them back in there. Now, he's doing it really thoughtfully. He's trying to make this, again, a lot more about this friendship and justifying his choice to kill off Apollo, because he regrets that and he wishes he hadn't done it. And so he's like,
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
well, now that we've got the Creed movies, I want to really give Apollo his day with Rocky IV. It's almost an apology for killing the character off. And I wonder if part of the reason he regrets it, because he said that, I wonder if part of the reason he regrets it doesn't have to do with just, well, we're making these Creed movies now, and that actor is still around and acting, and I can't use him, and, like, that sucks. He's got to be feeling that a little bit, I would think.
But that was one of the best parts about their relationship, is just watching Stallone and Carl Weathers, who are like awesome together.
Yeah, it's a palpable friendship, and it's really believable, and it's one of those wonderful iconic things where we do, the reverse of like the Superman Lex thing, where you have two like titans that have to be enemies and then develop this really deep friendship because of their antagonism. I mean, how cool is it to take the villain of two movies and make it your best friend? But anyway, so yeah,
That's why Rocky 3 is awesome.
there's a scene at the beginning where I think maybe the opening scene, or nearly the opening scene, after that montage where Apollo and Rocky are just like out in the yard talking, that's pretty meandery and doesn't need to be there, because everything that gives us exposition wise and in setting up their motivations, we get again in the dinner scene right after it. So that's not necessary. You don't have to have that. There's a couple of scenes like that here and there, where it's like, this was cut for a reason. And to go back to the thing I started to say a minute ago, you get that with a lot of director's cuts, where it's like, well, we have all these deleted scenes that could get put in there. And like I said, I think he's mostly doing it thoughtfully, but sometimes things are cut for a reason, and there's a couple of things like that should be cut.
It's the Jabba the Hutt scene in A New Hope, where it has some of the exact same dialogue as the Greedo scene.
Yeah,
So the fact that they're both in the movie is weird.
it's cool to see it, but it messes with the artistry of it, where it's like, this is only here as a novelty if you've not got to see this before. Most of the stuff that's added back in this isn't like that, and a lot of it is really wonderfully subtle, where if you haven't seen Rocky IV in a while, you might watch this and go, things feel different, and I don't know why. And whether you like the tonal changes or not, I think it's pretty respectable that it's not just a director's cut in, we added some scenes back in. Like, it's edited differently in some places. We're there's some new like insert shots with facial expressions with Drago particularly and Rocky some at the end in and around the big fight that just changes the context of that whole thing, which I really appreciate. The stuff that was added that I most appreciated. Sorry, I guess I'm not doing best thing, worst thing right now. I'm just talking about added scenes. The thing that, well, I guess I will say this is my best thing. My best thing, as far as the actual cut goes, and then I'll talk theme for a second because this is kind of a tie. My best thing is Duke. And it's also the thing that pisses me off about the original cut now. Everything that's put back in with that character, it's a freaking crime that it wasn't in the original. And whoever edited that and got rid of those scenes should be ashamed of themselves. Because, first of all, his speech, his eulogy after Apollo dies, is some of the best dialogue in the entire movie. And the fact that it wasn't there originally and that we haven't seen it for 35 years, it's wrong, it's incorrect, and there are people who love Rocky that have died by now that didn't get to see that, and that's not cool. It makes me angry. Because Duke is one of those characters in movies that I want to be my favorite character, but he doesn't get enough screen time, so I can't say that. I always thought he was really cool, and he's the thing that, and this is true to some degree in the original 4, but because of his added scenes, he's the thing that helps keep the focus on Apollo and gives that character still a lot of presence in the second act, or in the second half, even after he's died. And there are several places where there's just a little bit more dialogue he gets, or a whole scene that wasn't in the original, and it's like, why are we cutting this guy out? This is the legacy of the character you killed off. That's like the main crux of the character arc for Rocky. What are you doing? So
yeah,
like,
the part where he stops Rocky and he's like, "I raised Apollo." Like, that scene's great.
yeah, and that's in the original, but I think it's a little extended here.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I could be wrong. Like I said, I wish I got to see them back to back.
That funeral thing really ticks me off. Like, once I saw it, because most of the stuff that's added back in, I'm like, there's no reason to cut this. Mm-hmm. And then there's one scene that I read a review of this on Screen Rant or something, where somebody was saying you have superfluous added scenes. Like, they did a pretty good breakdown of this, and whoever wrote that article was like, there's some superfluous scenes like the boardroom scene, where you really just don't need it. There's no good reason that it's there. It's a little bit redundant. And I'm like, so that is true, but here's what's really funny about that scene. They have this bit where I think it's the boxing commission is talking to Rocky, and they're all worried about like boxing getting banned because of things like Apollo getting killed in the ring. And if that scene was in the original, the whole notion of people talking about a boxing ban at the beginning of 5 wouldn't have come out of nowhere. And so, like, I don't like Rocky 5. I'm fine with that being somewhat, like, just excised from the canon. But if you have to have it, if that is a movie, it's retroactively, it's kind of weird that scene's not in there, because that actually set that whole thing up and would have made it feel a little bit less like Rocky goes to Russia, and when he comes back, it's suddenly the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because that has that really hard at the beginning of 5.
It's insane. They get back, and off the airplane, you have at the beginning of 5, you have a journalist going up to Rocky, and or maybe it was the press conference with the bad guy in the movie. I can't remember, but there's talk about boxing getting shut down, and I'm like, oh, it's the sensibilities of the 90s now. Everybody's suddenly worried about violence. They weren't in '86, but they are now. It wouldn't have come out of nowhere.
So basically, this cut inspired every Rocky movie after it. We just never had this cut.
Isn't that weird? It's almost like that movie was a sequel to this version or a version with some of that stuff left back in. And then my other best thing, just thematically, is that now the Russia Cold War thing is a metaphor for Rocky and Apollo's relationship, and not the other way around. And I love that, partly because it feels a lot less hokey. Like, there's some almost Superman 4 going on in Rocky 4.
Absolutely
at
is.
the end of that. I didn't have that as much with this version, and some people are complaining that it ends on like too downbeat this time, and it's not as like bombastic and exciting. I love that it's not. I liked everything about the changes made at the end of that. I always hated that speech, and it's cut down, and there's less over-the-top takes being used. When Rocky had, just to my recollection of the original version, when Rocky in the theatrical version is like I can change, you can change, everybody can change. It's like everybody can change. It's a really subtle take this time around. Apparently he recorded that some different ways, and Stallone, I think, very smartly used a more understated version. Part of the reason I say that it feels a little bit like a fan cut is that he's trying to find a way to make it feel more like 1 and 2, with some sometimes pretty hokey material. So he's doing the same thing that you have to do if you're going to try to make something like, and this isn't obviously as bad as this, but if you have to, try to turn Batman and Robin into 89. Like, okay, well, now it's a 35-minute movie with everything that you have to cut out. And it's amazing that this movie is longer, actually, than the original. But a lot of it isn't taking a lot of entire scenes away. It's using different takes and cutting down certain things that just don't work. So yeah, it's wonderful. Overall, I think, like, I much prefer it to the original. There's just, a few things that I think should have stayed on the cutting room floor. But that's it for me. My worst thing is that the driving montage is left in.
Yeah, that seems super silly.
Does not need to be there. There have been complaints about the change of the song at the end, that it's not "Hearts on Fire" anymore, and that we went
Eye of the Tiger.
That we went back to "Eye of the Tiger," and the point of that, the Screen Rant article that I read brought this up, and I think they're right about it. That the point of that seems to be going back to the whole Eye of the Tiger idea and kind of allegory in 3, and what Apollo was saying to Rocky in trying to motivate him with that fight in 3, to find reason for it. And so he's going back to that now after Apollo has died. I don't know how well that plays if you haven't seen 3 in a while. It's curious that Eye of the Tiger isn't played, if memory serves, in the montage at the beginning, because he feels the need to remind you of all the important story beats, but in a lot of ways it watches like kind of a, I don't know, this is a weird analogy, but it has a little bit of that, like, Star Wars episodes 5 and 6 thing, or anything where you have 2 movies that one is supposed to be a sequel to the other, but it's actually kind of one movie. It feels like Stallone is kind of trying to make Rocky 3 and 4 one arc now, which is never how it felt before, and it kind of works.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, you don't get Eye of the Tiger played at the beginning, but you do get Carl Weathers being like, "Oh, you got the Eye of the Tiger, Rock."
Oh yeah, they did have him say it. Okay, well that's good. So at least it's in there.
Yeah. No, I thought that
I would say,
cool
okay,
name.
in that case, some of that, I'll take away what I said earlier to some degree. That maybe it is good that some of that stuff is recapped, I guess. But only because it's so much more of a direct sequel than these have really been before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, because those movies are so, like, one and done.
Yeah, and this version of it isn't now. Like, it's an extension of that movie. Almost as much as Search for Spock is of Wrath of Khan. I think I would go that far.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and
Or
they
at the
play a
very
lot of
least,
three.
that's what Stallone wants it to be now.
Hmm. That yeah, no, I agree. I think that's definitely what they were trying to do. I mean, you get so much of Rocky 3 played in this movie too, which makes me happy because I love Rocky 3.
And I also love just how much more tragic Drago seems to be, and how much more of his arc that's off screen that you're not seeing, that if you can get yourself a little bit in his head, feels like he's going through his own Rocky 1, but it's a tragic version where it doesn't work out for him at the end. And then we'll see in Creed 2 how it ruins his entire life.
Oh my God, why I need to see that. And it's funny too because when
Because it's
Rocky
freaking
Balboa,
heartbreaking.
it's cool though that he brought that character back because I don't know if you remember this, but when Rocky Balboa came out, Stallone was like, "Oh, here's what happened to like each of the villains from each movie. Like I'll just throw out like what happened to them." And he was like, Drago after that defeat was so heartbroken he like killed himself and that was it. So it's cool that he was like, I got this story to do with him.
Yeah, that's great. And he's
Because he
not in
could
a
have just
lot of
stuck
that
with that.
movie because it's, just like with Creed, it's not about him, it's about his son.
Mm. Yeah, exactly.
But it
I mean, I
also
assume.
is about him in the same way it's about Rocky. But anyway, I had a lot more to say about this than I thought I would.
Rocky's awesome. We should do more stuff on Rocky.
I would like
That was
to.
my takeaway.
I don't know how much interest there would be on that, but yeah, I'd like to. I've thought about doing commentaries on that forever.
Hmm. No, those films are brilliant. I love them.
I kind of took over there for a long time. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure that you got out that we talked about?
Mm. No, because a lot of it's just stuff that I like about Rocky Four. Like we kept the awesome. He runs up the top of the mountain and he does the Drago. It's great. I love it. While also being more serious. Like I'm glad we got that stuff.
Yeah, like
Even the robot.
it is still that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's they edit it and change it to be a much more serious and thoughtful film, while also still it's Rocky Four at the end of the day.
And I think the balance works. I don't think the goofy stuff takes away from any of that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I
Especially
agree.
because there's still some of that in 3.
Oh, Rocky 3 is, I think, just as silly as Rocky 4.
And I don't think it has that reputation, but it kind of is. Like, I don't know what Clubber Lang's problem is.
My favorite scene in Rocky 3 is when Rocky's at like the press conference and Clubber Lang's like, "Oh, like you're a fake champ, you're a fake champ," and Rocky's just like, "I'm not gonna fight you," and he like starts to walk away, and Clubber Lang looks at Adrian and he's like, hey woman, want to meet a real man?" And Rocky turns around, he's like, "I'll kill you."
Yeah, it's nuts.
That movie's awesome.
One of the coolest things in Rocky Four, I think, and of course it's in this cut too, is the kind of subversion with the training montage. Not just that he's isolated and he has to do everything pretty much himself, but that it gets interrupted with Adrian showing up and they're kind of reconciling, and then it keeps going after that. I've always really liked that choice.
I had like a very strong reaction when she showed up where I was like, I liked the movies like after, but I was like, man, I miss when it was just like simple like this. This is Rocky and Adrian. Now she's gone. Everyone Rocky knew is dead.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but that's life. And Rocky was always about how life's not fair.
Oh no, that's not me being like, screw those other movies, because movies are great. But it was just like in that moment where I was like, man, I miss these older movies. Like this is just a lot of fun.
And I think she gets some of her best stuff to do in that movie, and like some of her best performances, particularly the scene where she's at the top of the stairs and she just starts yelling at him for trying to reclaim glory days and all of that. Like that's a great speech.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
But anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're both Flip Green. Thanks a lot for watching. If you haven't seen this cut yet and you like the Rocky movies, I think you owe it to yourself to check it out. And yeah, eventually, I hope we can kind of tear into the series at some point. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That'd be great.
Thanks a lot for watching, folks. If you saw this, leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about it. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan, and this was Austin the Day Ghost.
Bye, everybody. Drago!
Ivan! Drago!